Jeffrey Weissman. You know me from Pale Rider, Twilight Zone, dozens of other films, Back to the Future 2 and 3, and you're listening to The Movie Raid with Mike.
It's time for the movie raid, and tonight's victim is acting coach Jeffrey Weissman that played in Back to the Future Part 2 and 3 and Pale Rider, amongst others. Hello. So what new adventure do we have this year?
Oh, new adventures. The adventures never stop. I'm currently in a film called The Traveler, where I play a nefarious time traveler who lures his accomplices into following him through time so he can pull off his devious plans of taking over a small country by stealing the love interests of various people. Hopefully you saw the preview link to that.
I did. So what makes this different stand out compared to the other, I would say, back in time type films?
This is traits that the characters have sort of embedded in their system, that they went to study with these aliens as to were posing as high holy men, and it was part of a spiritual practice. They learned how to time travel. It's a novel concept and pretty high concept. What you saw was basically the proof of concept, but it's also doing the festival circuit.
I see. So go in a little bit more of your character of exactly what makes him stand out compared to throughout the film.
Well, for me, it's a nice change of pace. Years and years of comedy work. You might know me as Screech's guru on Saved by the Bell. I had sort of a silly comedy role, even though it was a dramatic western with Clint Eastwood and Pale Rider. I get some nice laughs in it. I do a lot of physical comedy. I've played Charlie Chaplin and Stan Laurel, Groucho Marx for years and years. In fact, I leave tomorrow for Florida with my Three Stooges team for a gig. Because I opted cast in comedy, it was really nice to get a bad guy role. And it's happening more now. People are seeing that I'm not cornered into just comedy. Last year I played a very depressed widower with epilepsy in a very heavy drama called Savior of None. That should be hitting the shelves here pretty soon this year. It's really great to play the heavy roles or heavy dramatic. There's a role that I should be shooting this year. It's just you think he's a really great guy, and he turns out to be the fiend behind the terrible shit that goes down in the film. So it's really fun to sink your teeth into roles, at least for me, that they usually don't get cast. Stretch those or flex those muscles.
Yeah, it makes you wonder that on some of these actors, like, they be stereotyped a lot. And a lot of them do not want to even be that way, but there are ones that just play the one-sided character almost in every film they ever played.
Well, that's because the industry really has blinders on in a way. There's not that much trust. It takes years and years for an actor to get established with casting directors and producers and directors, writers, and often if you do well in a role, you're known for that role. That's what they want to cast you in because you did so well, or information from the breakdown services. And often in the breakdown service, they'll say, we want Leonardo DiCaprio type, rather than go to Leo himself because maybe they don't have enough money for him. They'll want someone who's like him, if you get my meaning. Especially an actor that doesn't necessarily have a marquee name value. They'll see you in, say, a cop role or the guy next door, whatever category it is. And that's the way you get filed in a casting director's mind or the director's or writer's heads, producer. They say, oh, well, I want someone who's like so-and-so. And I see these actors going up on roles where it actually refers to them in the breakdown. We want someone like Steve Buscemi. Well, there's Steve Buscemi going up for the role. Rather than call his agent directly, they'll say, well, I want someone like this person. This is very odd business and sometimes very fickle. And like I said, it has blinders on and there's a trust issue. It's like you yourself have mentioned that horror films and other films or stories are remade because they don't necessarily trust new scripts or these old products have been proven already. Well, let's do them now, update them, or add current stars in them and rehash, remake, remodel.
Yeah. Do you think the film industry is actually devolving a little bit because of this? Popular franchises that started out in film and they, of course, have the rights, and now they just keep rehashing of the same sequels and sequel and remake, and then just keep doing it until the point where it bombs, and then they remake it again another 2 or 3, maybe 5 years later, and just keeps holding on to that rather than continuing to do other projects.
It's a screwy business in that the studios, since maybe, I want to say the early 80s, sort of have been taken over by, bean counters, attorneys, agents, and accountants. And they know that if they have one big blockbuster, that'll pay for the other 15 terrible films that didn't make any money that they made that year. It's a numbers game. And once again, like I said, they don't really trust all the newcomers in town or trust the new scripts. The studios are a weird entity that you said have devolved. There hasn't been really an evolution. I should rephrase this. Some studios and production companies family, wonderful stories that have a moral that, you see every year something wonderful like, Theory of Everything or tell the story like Spotlight does this year of the terrible priest molesting children scandals and how that was discovered. And, there's some great storytelling that has got great meaning for society, whereas other stuff is complete fluff, fantasy. They know that what they're making. So you've got two different sort of schools, some for just pure entertainment and escapism, and others to drive home moral responsibility or tell stories that need to be told. And, it's not necessarily the industry de-evolving into that, but unfortunately there's these pockets of, I'll say, studio execs that don't seem to care what goes on as long as money is being made as the bottom line. And that's unfortunate. There's a lot of really bad influence on our society with murder and mayhem that goes on. Whereas if it's part of a necessary story, if you see Straight Outta Compton, that's an amazing film. It tells a very real story, and all the violence in it really is a necessary part of telling that story, whereas a Rambo or, sort of the gratuitous violent stuff just kind of irritates the hell out of me personally, because it, I think, sets a bad example of here's a hero using horrible violence and is justified in mayhem and death, as opposed to détente and negotiation. I don't know. I could go off on this tangent for a long time on this.
Get the audience attention, but sometimes it's not the only way to do that.
Well, it's been going on for years. Say, well before film came in as a medium, there was the Grand Guignol, which was theater in France that was extant for almost 100 years, doing horror theater. And so it's an escape and an excitement and, a way for people to sort of get their yayas out, the entertainment through gore and horror. And that genre, of course, translates great to the big screen and has for years proven itself to be a great moneymaker. And people try to find a new angle to heighten the entertainment value. That's why, the parody type films like Scream and all are so popular, because here's humor. And the Grand Guignol used to do this. They'd have a little short comedy piece and then go in for the horror film, not film, but the horror story. And, people get so sick from the actual realism of the special effects in this French theater that they had an alleyway where people could go out and puke, and they get so upset and sick from these stories. Modern day films that, my God, since the beginning of film, have capitalized on the horror genre as an escape, and it's really quite wonderful. Though at times I see, I think it was probably Tech Chainsaw Massacre that really just started getting to me. I can't take this much blood and gratuitous gore and horrible sadistic violence and shit. It's not my cup of meat, but there's still those out there who love it. And I've even appeared in some horror films myself. I've had fans come to me and ask me to be in their horror films. Merry Horror Stories that Ryan Scott Weber made. People who go to Chiller Theater up in Parsippany, New Jersey know his work really well, because he's very popular, and he was such a great guy, but he had no money really, and so I just shot a scene for his film on my own here on the West Coast and sent it back to him, and he inserted it in his film, and it came out pretty good. And a lot of it isn't, say, the gratuitous, constant bloodbath. A lot of it's tongue-in-cheek. There's a lot of humor in it. I did another one called Flying Saucer Rock and Roll about alien pot-smoking zombies that come down and smoke a doobie with you and you turn into a zombie. That was very silly. And Eric Calero, I just happened to be working with his dad on writing projects, and this film thing sort of evolved. And it's just terrible because it's done on no budget and all, but it's fun, and it helps people, realize their dreams and to become a filmmaker and in a place where otherwise they may not have the ability to, because it's so expensive and so hard to break into the business. I love helping people actualize their dreams, and I've been in some horror films that were truly terrifying. I was lucky enough to work on George Miller's segment of Twilight Zone movie with John Lithgow on the airplane, the remake of Nightmare at 30,000 Feet. And that was the scariest episode of that film. And it was a gas to work with George, even though Fury Road is horribly violent from start to finish, practically. It's really a very exciting, well-made story. But when it's a story that doesn't really have any meat in it, it's not gratifying. It's not satisfying, I think, and thus gives horror films kind of a bad name. If there's no story there, if there's no emotional risk, the characters don't have anything at stake, then it seems gratuitous. Say Victorian times, people really lived vicariously through the newspapers, the stories in the papers, and they were obsessed with the accounts of murders and so on and so forth. And that was, I would say, a kind of entertainment. And earlier in the 20th century, yellow journalism really was all about profit. They would print headlines that had really no basis, yet it sold newspapers, and that's how they made a lot of money. It's really kind of irresponsible. I'd love to see more responsibility in filmmaking.
What do you think an ideal image should the film industry follow?
Well, something that has some integrity with morality. I really think that there's the privileged, the elite, the rich, the wealthy, that is almost immoral with lack of caring. I can't put down someone for laying $1 million down for a new Bugatti, but at the same time, if they live in a community isolated that is suffering terribly for lack of soul, lack of caring and arts and housing, there's something terribly imbalanced there. And in film, like I said, the films that tell stories that need to be told. I didn't care for The Big Short that much, but that story needed to be told. Spotlight could have been done, I think, directed better, but the acting was superb, and that story needs to be told. When I mentioned the Straight Outta Compton, I'm trying to this year's Academy nominees. That story, even though I don't know if that film got nominated, but sure should have. It's an amazing story and frightening as hell, and based on reality, on a real story.
Yeah.
This police abuse and what these kids had come out of to create their art and then fight for their lives, all that success brought them. Really compelling stories that have a moral to them, I think, is the ultimate goal, the model that should be looked for in scriptwriters.
But when it comes back to the acting portion, what do you think is more reliable? Do you think technical or practical methods?
The technical or practical approach to acting?
Yes.
There's different ways of defining great acting. Master coaches have different ways of defining, like in Uta Hagen's Respect for Acting, she discusses the representational and the presentational, the very stagey kind or the very naturalistic kind, and both have validity, if that's what you're referring to. I used to study a very specific subjective personalization technique that was based in the method that had emotional recall and sensory recall, the sort of more Strasbergian method, and then sort of advanced into a very intuitive, subconscious, guided trust talent method, which is very technical in that you have to keep the critical mind occupied with the task at hand, which keeping fascinated and all your attention on your scene partner or what's going on in the scene, and trusting the material, that the character is written in the material and that you understand the relationships and everything that's actually in the text, if it's well written. Otherwise, you have to often create the stuff, if it's not well written, for yourself to bring heightened drama to it, the danger, the risks, to deepen the relationships, both with characters or environment or props, whatever you're working with. I go to task, battle with acting coaches actually often. Right now I'm on the social network with one coach who spouts these little quips that are clever acting tips that have really little basis in reality or logic. And these coaches that say that this is the only technique that really works, and I say bullshit to that. That an actor, I'm going to be wired to a technique that may work for me that you might try and doesn't do shit for you. You may try a technique that I don't agree with, but it works for you and gets the emotions full. That basically, I try to get my students to experience a little bit of Meisner, fantasy charging, the Michael Chekhov, more advanced Stanislavski work, and then also bring in, of course, Stella Adler's action work and expose them to some Casellas and Strasbergian, emotional stuff, and sing until you're out of breath, letting emotions out. Different exercises to see what works for them, and also to give them tools so that if one technique isn't happening during an audition or on the set, that they have other tools, tricks in their pockets that they can go to. Not everyone is born with natural talents. We all wish that we had at our fingertips what little Jacob did. If you've seen The Room, this kid at 8 years old out-acted almost all the other actors in the field for this Academy season. I mean, the kid was amazing, and I spoke at length with the director on this, and he just was right there in the moment and came up with a lot of the things, actions, and lines that he said in the film right there in the moment, because he was so connected. And that kid was born with talent and just had a really great guide in that director. And a lot of actors don't have that, or they've unlearned that natural technique, the natural talent, because the critical brain in society molds you. And to sort of silence that and get back to that level where you're just wide open and in the moment and everything's working on so many levels intuitively and trusting your subconscious to connect with the material. It's not an easy task, and it's very hard to get to, but you can. There is technique there to get that, and I teach that.
And there's a lot of the younger actors that are playing in these big, newer films, but in terms of putting the energy in a character or in a role, do you think they're pushing a little bit too much energy? Do you think there's such thing as too much energy, or pushing it a little bit too much to get that moment?
Yeah, well, you can miss moments by pushing too much. You can overdo resonating truth and authenticity by pushing too much, if that's what you're saying, certainly. And it's always great to develop sort of the actor's third eye, or the outside eye that is more of a director to keep you in check. Now, with the availability of digital technology, you can shoot your scenes and then play them back. If you can't watch them on a monitor while you're doing them, or look in the mirror while you're doing it. But I mean, some actors do. I remember hearing Richard Dreyfuss used to go in the bathroom and look in the mirror while he was doing his lines just to check his own truth and authenticity. You can see your own work now with playback so easily, and then develop your relationship with the camera and know, because that is your stage, you need to know your framing and then know if you're open to the camera and so on and so forth, your limits. And that's so available now, so that makes it much easier to adjust. And then some actors that really may not have all that much talent, but they know how to raise an eyebrow. They know how to do a shifty eye or grimace just right, so it's believable to fit the material, and that's all they really need to do, because the part that they're getting, that's all they do. It's very interesting. There's a lot of different technique out there. A lot of people do whatever it takes just to get by, and they get away with it, and it's what it is.
Yeah, and in terms of to character development, they got to know what it's all about. You don't have to go in great detail what this character is. We're in a crucial time where when you play a role, you really have to make that role, quote, sell the role, so they get, for the audience to actually see and believe the character has to work right. So the question is, what do you think is a well-developed character?
Well, there could be well-developed characters in scripts that actors destroy because they walk through a part. I have a couple that I've seen where I saw the scripts before they went before the camera, and I was like, God, this is fantastic, this is incredible, and have seen what the actor, usually a star, has done, and then if they've walked through the part, or if they're high while they're shooting or whatever, just totally destroyed the film and sunk it, because they weren't working, their heart wasn't into it, or they were manipulating the director, or whatever the case may be. There's often not a script that goes in front of the camera, especially on the bigger budget film, that hasn't really got a great character or two at the heart of it. It really is up to the team of the director and writer and actor to keep each other in check, that reading authentic and bringing all the colors that hopefully are there in the script to life, or adding more colors. It's the writer laying that groundwork, and then of course on the other end, the editor, who's got to really tell that story. If the editor muddles it by telling too much story or cuts out some really important things, it could be sunk as well there. It's a team. You got to really have a great team to make a great film.
There's films now that have what I call the super group, or pay for the face type film, where you have all these very known actors are playing these roles, which isn't entirely bad, but at the same time, you're really showing that you're just trying to push out money for this film, as well as boosting the title and stuff like that, basically market it off, rather than make an actual film, because you see like probably 5 or 6 very well-known actors, and it's like no room for the other guys.
Well, once again, it's I think based a lot in the integrity of the director, or whoever might be producing and helming it and reining the director in, if the director is out in left field. The looks of Superman versus Batman film, from the trailer, it looks really great, but I had my reservations with some of the casting, but it looks like people have been reined in, and the creative team has done a good job, but we'll see when it comes out.
Well, go ahead and plug in any websites or any of your projects. Let's discuss your project one more time as well. Any last words that you have for everybody else?
Well, the Traveler, once again, is just doing the festival circuit. It's more of a proof of concept, so it's just a short film, a taste of how we can do the special effects and everything, hopefully get into a feature or a series. The Savior of None hasn't a release date yet, but it is a fun little indie film. I can't say fun. It's really a heavy story about abuse in the foster care system. And my character has a key role of becoming an avenging angel for this adolescent, wonderful girl who's abused in that system. I've got a couple projects that I'm developing, and I'm constantly doing something. You know, I've got a couple things coming down the pike that I can't talk about yet. So have me back on so I can promote them once there's a release. And then, I've got all sorts of things out there that people can see. I've got fantastic shorts that are available online for free, like Nobody's Laughing, in which I play a guy who's only comfortable when he's made up as a clown. And it's a really wonderful, heartwarming story, a great little short that you can find on YouTube and Vimeo, Nobody's Laughing. And then a bunch of others, because I've taught a lot of filmmakers, I often will support them in their projects, and so I'll be in their films, like Shadow Angel, and there's a wonderful one where I play a homeless guy who's trying to reunite with his daughter called Bottle Caps. Those are online. You can find them. Another horror one, We Missed You, Pete, is really fun. And a lot of these are made by filmmakers as they were just getting out of film school or still students, and now a lot of them are working in the industry. I've done that almost all my career. I worked on one of Catherine Hardwicke's, directed Twilight and Lords of Dogtown, 13. Helped her with one of her first projects called Road Girls, which was just a farce, fun romp. I love watching people, I've done that with people like Greg Araki and John Schwartzman, the people whose hearts were in these projects, and they would come to me since I'd worked already with maybe Clint Eastwood or George Miller, what have you, and because I liked their focus and their dreams, I would help them out, and that's the kind of guy I am. I like work.
Well, there you go. That is actor, acting coach Jeffrey Weissman.